It feels fitting to call this book legendary. Legends grow and change as they're translated, chopped up, put back together, passed down, and yet when you get back to the foundation, it's warm and friendly, inviting, comfortable, familiar, and downright enjoyable. And that is certainly How to Have a Green Thumb Without Naking Back by the legendary herself, Ruth Stout. So, perhaps some of you have never heard of Ruth Stout, and perhaps some of you found this video because you're interested in her. But either way, Ruth Stout is a name you are bound to run into nowadays. Her eponymous style of gardening using thick layers of mulch and no tilling is it's growing in popularity as it saves time, saves energy, saves material, and most importantly, saves your soil. Disturbing the soil, particularly heavy tilling, interrupts and sometimes destroys the web of life in your soil. And without knowing it, Ruth Stout had hit upon a method many, many decades ago that worked to rebuild her soil life. She stopped using pesticides, she stopped using herbicides, she just laid down spoiled hay for the most part, and cuttings from her garden, and then she composted in place. And it worked. And she ended up writing this book and several others, and now, 70 years after she first released this book, and 80 years after she started, 70 or 80 years at least after she first started gardening. We are talking about this little old lady from Connecticut. So, How to Have a Green Thumb Without Naking Back is definitely a remarkable book, and if you have any interest in gardening, I suggest that you take a look at it. If all you want is to learn her method, the method is explained in its original form and in many variations all over YouTube alone. It's not far different from some of the heavy mulch things that are talked about in other not called Ruth Stout no-dig methods. So as far as the particulars of the Ruth Stout method of just not tilling and putting down about 7 inches thick layer of mulch, maybe a little more, that's it. We've talked about it. The method's there. But the book is full of much more than just her method, and it seems like somewhere between a long journal and a conversation with a spunky old lady from Connecticut. She talks about how she and her husband purchased this 55-acre property, and how eager she was to find an old Baldwin apple tree and a lilac bush, and how she spent years struggling in her garden and spraying with pesticides and working in manure by hand and all sorts of other things. And a good portion of the book is dedicated to her explaining what she considers her mistakes, which I love. I really enjoy when people can show you what they did wrong, because then it's a lot easier to see what you're doing wrong. Rather than just saying, this is what you have to do, and even explaining why, you get to kind of understand the ins and outs of what not to do. And Ruth Stout definitely goes into that a bit in her book. And it does not feel like she's not upset about time wasted. She's happy to have learned. She's happy for the time that she had, and it makes you feel less bad about any mistakes you might have made, particularly if you're like me and a bit like Ruth Stout, where you're overeager, maybe stretching yourself a little bit far, adding too many things, which is definitely something she talks about having done. She has some suggestions for particular plants. It's actually kind of nice I don't know if the seed catalog she talks about is even available anymore, but she talks about specific breeds of plants that she likes, and having people come visit and making them work in the garden and making new beds, and her mom planting the flowers while she planted the vegetables, and all sorts of other things. You're getting a peek into this woman's life and into the life of, you know, people in post-war America, which in itself is interesting. So, yeah, I really loved this book. I hope to be able to get my hands on the rest of Ruth Stout's books, both the ones about gardening and not about gardening, because even if I were to never garden again, I feel as though my life has improved by reading her work. I feel like I'm going to regret not talking about more. Oh, that's one of the things. I had planned on picking out a passage from the book to read. Every few pages, I would think, this would be a great paragraph to read out. And honestly, I'd have to read you the whole book. It's full of small wits and wisdoms and turns of phrase, and yeah, it's just great. So I will stop repeating myself on that and just tell you, go get yourself a copy of this book, How to Have a Green Thumb Without Aching Back, by the legendary Ruth Stout. Read it and enjoy it, and yeah, I'll see you soon. Bye.